think so. We got his check though. Y'all give it up for Daniel. Daniel, y'all, he won the Poetry Slam. All right. And as she starts walking to the stage, you don't want her to come up here and get a picture. We had a tie. We had to break the tie. This young lady coming to the stage was amazing. She is your 2026 Take Our Story Slam champion. Give it up for Miss Brittany Lawrence, everybody.
Thank you very much. I did not know I was going to be saying a few words, but I have always, storytelling has a special place in my heart. It has been something I have done ever since I was a child. My family remembers my very first storytelling competition when I was in UIL, and I was like in the 2nd grade or 3rd grade, and I had to retell Brer Rabbit. And they still talk about that because I enjoyed it so much, and so it's just been a part of my life. And as an adult, I've just now started to come out to events like this, and it's really been just such a joy. So thank you for sharing with me today.
All right. I just had a report. We got to keep moving. He's coming in right now. He's coming in hot. Dan is here. Where's Dan? Give it up for our Poetry Slam champion, Dan, everybody. All right, Dan, you don't have to come up, man. We'll get to you. All right, that's it for me, y'all. Thank you very much. Now it's time for the Liars.
Nathan, and I am pleased to invite you to the annual Liars Contest of the Texas Storytelling Festival. Now, I get to be here because I won last year, so I know what it's like to be sitting over there waiting. They have drawn numbers to determine the order of telling, and there are 3 judges scattered somewhere. We will hear the 6 stories, and then the judges will leave the room to decide who gets 3rd place, 2nd place, and 1st place. Now, the top 3 get money. However, they're not like a lot of the liars that we have in our society, who earn much bigger money for their lies. The top prize is only $100 here. Sorry, folks. But everything's supposed to be bigger in Texas, but not the amount that a liar can get paid, apparently, at this festival. I am supposed to, take out your cell phone. Take out your cell phones, please. Take out your cell phones. And make sure they are silenced. Please make sure they are silenced. Thank you for that. Our first teller for the Liars Contest, Chester Weems.
Sir. And before I start making my children proud, I'm going to take a picture. I usually do this at festivals, so I'm going to take a picture. Jim Michael was really this side is really bad. Uncle Bill got a medal in the war. He didn't plan to get a medal off in the war like it was. family's kind of proud of him, but he really said, I didn't plan on getting a medal at all. In fact, he said, I didn't deserve the medal I got. But he was in the front lines, close by the front lines. Now, if you're striving to get a medal in a war, you can start by getting wounded. Well, that's not exactly what Uncle Bill did. He got injured. You see, he was a cook. And he got hurt in the kitchen. I'm not sure what you call it in the military, but that's where he got hurt. He got his hand hurt. And they said, Bill, if you don't get some attention to that hand real quick, you're liable to lose use of it. So we're going to ship you off to the aid station, which is way over there. And we're going to ship you over there by helicopter. Now, most of you have probably seen the old MASH shows when they have those helicopters flying in, the bubble top things, and they put the patients on the outside, strap them in on the outside. Well, that's the way they're going to ship Uncle Bill over there. He didn't mind that. Now, he said they had to strap me in really careful because they didn't want me to fall out, and they had to wrap me up real careful because it's cold up there. And so they did that. Now, the stretcher they used for those helicopters looks more like a child's snow sled. It's a flat surface, and it's got runners in the bottom, Well, those runners, they slip into grooves on the side of the helicopter. So you wrap the patient up, said he felt like a cocoon or more like a mummy. And they got him out there, and they slip that sucker in there like that. And at the head of the stretcher, they have him encased with a plastic bubble covering up his head because it's cold up there, and the wind's going to be going right past him because he's going to be outside this helicopter. So they get him loaded up, and they take off. Now, the shortest way was this way, and the enemy camp was about 2/3 the way over there, but they said, we're going to fly way over it. We're going to be so high, you're going to be safe. Don't you worry about that. So they took off, and it's wintertime, by the way. Hilly country, snow. They take off, and about the time they reach the ark, on the way, something happens to the pilot. We don't know what it was that caused him to do it, but he had to pull back on the controls. And the helicopter, did this. Front up, tail down. Well, the guys that click Uncle Bill into the grooves were new on the job. And they only got like a half a click. And when that helicopter did that, Uncle Bill became a projectile. And he could see it between his feet. Now, obviously, he's going to survive all this. That's why we have all this information. But he said it was terrifying. And you know that bubble around his head? It did two things. First, it kind of slowed him down just a little bit. But he knew he was going to die. In fact, the helicopter pilot knew he was going to die. Or actually, he referred to it, he was going to splat. Because he kept circling to watching where Uncle Bill was going to hit because he wanted to send out a rescue, to pick up the body later. Uncle Bill, the other part that round thing did was amplify the screaming. He admitted, he said, I screamed all the way through the whole thing. And this also was verified because about 4 or 5 days later, the enemy camp, those guys down there, they got captured and they verified this whole story. Uncle Bill is now a human projectile. And the enemy, they hear something. They hear this screaming. And they're looking around, and all of a sudden, up there's this thing coming right at them, and it's making this terrifying noise. And they know the Americans have just come up with a new weapon, a new terrifying weapon, and it's coming right at them. And so Uncle Bill's headed that way. He's screaming. He's going to splat on the ground, but it's hilly country, snow-covered. And it just so happens that stretcher that was kind of like a sled, it hit at just the right angle on the side of a hill. And it became a sled, and it landed sideways on it, right down that hill. And it's good, but it's still going really fast. He's still screaming. He said he screamed through the whole thing. He headed toward that camp. And the enemy's they're looking around, and they're jumping for cover. Uncle Bill's riding right through that camp. He's going fast, right through it. Now, the philosophy of the enemy
was to provide fresh food for their troops. So on the other side of the camp, they had large pens with hundreds of chickens. And the chickens heard the screaming too. What's that? What's that? And Uncle Bill is sliding through the camp. Uncle Bill and the chickens, they're getting, what, hundreds, like this. He hits the side of the chicken pen. And by this time, they create such an updraft that Uncle Bill turns from a bomb to a rocket. And he's shooting into the air. The helicopter pilot's still up there circling. He's watching all this in amazement, and he sees Uncle Bill shooting into the air. He gets that helicopter over there, positions himself right in front of him, and he slides right into those grooves. He's locked into place, and now he's safe. And they take him on over to the aid camp where he gets his hand fixed. All is well. About 3 months later, Uncle Bill is back cooking, like what he does. These two officers come in, with the really, really sharp stuff with all the metals. And they said, Bill, get out of here. You guys gather around. Bill, you're going to get a medal. Why? All I did was fall out of a helicopter. Oh, no. They started reading the commendation. And the commendations talked about the effort he had made in furtherance of the military objectives of disrupting the enemy's food supply. In other words, Uncle Bill got a medal for messing up their chicken soup.
That was Chester Weems. Thank you, Chester. Let me take a moment to thank some of the sponsors of this year's festival, the City of Denton and the Denton Benefit League. Let's have a round of applause for those two sponsors. They are appreciated very much. All right. Our second contestant in the Liars Contest is Walt Belcher. Walt Belcher.
Well, I grew up in the Carolina mountains. We called it the tailbone of the Appalachia. And we were poor. We were so poor that Thanksgiving, before the coldest winter we had, we didn't have anything to eat. My father found a magazine on the side of the road, and he tore out a picture of a turkey, and he passed it around the table, and we all got to lick it once. That's how poor we were. And right after that, we had the coldest winter in the history of the Carolinas. It was so cold that my shadow would freeze behind me, and I had to carry around an ice pick to keep it up with me. Our words would freeze when we spoke, and we had to wait till springtime till they thawed out to hear what we had said. It was cold, but despite this, we survived. We ate kudzu. Now, I understand that kudzu doesn't grow much in Texas, but in the Carolinas, in Georgia, it grows everywhere. It'll grow on you if you don't move fast enough. And kudzu, if you boil it long enough, tastes kind of like kale. But we were tired of that. We were tired of that, and it began to thaw out. And one morning, I was about 18, living with my mother and father in a cabin up in the mountains, and my father wakes me up and says, son, we ain't got any food in the house. We're going to starve. But I saw a rabbit run by the house this morning, and I got one bullet left for my gun. And I got this gun that's been hanging on the shelf for 20 years. It's a rifle. Put that bullet in there, go out there and get that rabbit. Don't come home till you get that rabbit. I said, okay, Pa, I can do that. I put on my boots and my overalls and my hat, and I went out the door, and I moseyed off into the forest. Now, I was the champion mosier of the Carolinas. I could take a 2-hour walk and turn it into a 4-hour mosey. That's how good I was. And I was moseying along into the forest, and all of a sudden up above me I heard gobble, 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 gobble. I looked up, and there was 2 turkeys roosting in a tree. I said, well, I could shoot one of those turkeys, got one bullet. But Daddy wanted a rabbit, and well, I got a slingshot. So I pulled out my slingshot, and I went above their head, missed them by a mile. But I hit a broken branch up there, an old rotten branch. It fell down, knocked those turkeys in the head, and knocked them to the ground. And they were at my feet. I had 2 turkeys. I could go home. But Daddy wanted a rabbit, and I still had a bullet left. But then, because of all that commotion, a bear came out of the woods, and it was coming right at me, and I could see its mouth opening up, and its jaws. I was scared. I reached out as a reflex, and my hand went down his throat. I pulled my hand back and turned the bear inside out. Well, I had a bear and 2 turkeys. I could go home, but Daddy wanted a rabbit, and I had a bullet left. And I was trying to wipe my arm off when I noticed that all that commotion and the smell of that blood had caused a wild boar to come out of the forest. And the wild boar was coming right at me, and I was backing up against a tree, and I fainted. The boar went past me and hit the tree and knocked his brains out. Well, now I had a bear and a boar and 2 turkeys. I could go home, but Daddy wanted a rabbit. I still had a bullet left, but I got blood all over my arm. So I walk over to the nearby lake, and I start washing my arm off, and I notice that there's 6 geese coming in from the east and 6 ducks coming in from the west, and I look straight ahead, and there's 2 beady eyes staring at me. It's an alligator. Now, you may wonder what an alligator's doing in a northern lake, Carolina lake. Well, they used to sell baby alligators in Florida. I think people bought it, and they were flying it back to New York, and they decided to flush it out the back. And it fell into that lake and grew to be 20 feet long. Anyway, I don't know how the gator got there, but he was there, and he was coming right at me. And I said, oh, Daddy, I'm going to have to use that bullet. And I had already waded down out in the water, and I'd stuck my gun in the sand, and it barreled first. And I pulled it out, not thinking, put the bullet in there, got ready to shoot that gator between the eyes, when all of a sudden I felt something coming up my leg. And it was it was a big old catfish, and it was inside my leg, and he stung me. And as he stung me, I pulled the trigger, and I went back like this, and the barrel split in half. And I knocked those 6 geese out of the air, and 6 ducks out of the air. The bullet went up a mile and came down through the gator's head. And the stock of the gun hit me on the shoulder and killed a deer behind me. I had all that to take home, but I didn't have a rabbit, and I'd used my bullet. Then I noticed on my breast pocket that my brass button right here was gone. And I looked over, and it was right between the eyes of a rabbit. So I had a rabbit, a gator, a catfish, 6 geese, 6 ducks, a deer, a bear, a boar, and 2 turkeys. I could go home. And Ma got a fur coat. Dad got alligator shoes. We had rabbit for dinner, and I became the greatest one-bullet hunter in the history of the Carolinas.
Two more sponsors to thank. See, this filler gives the judges time to wrap up their comments about each contestant. We want to thank the National Endowment for the Arts and the Tejas Storytelling Association. So a round of applause for those 2 sponsors. Our next contestant, Judy Tarowski. Come on up, Judy.
I had a horse. He was a 17-2 hand chestnut thoroughbred. His name was Norman. And before I got him, he had been a competitive hunter-jumper. But when I finally got him, he and I were very content just to hack around the indoor arena or ride around the outdoor ring at the stable where I boarded him. And when we went riding, we had some great conversations. And we'd talk and just talk about anything. Why, we like to talk about politics. He always favored the dark horse candidate. And we'd talk about sports. I was for the Steelers, and he always was for the Broncos. And we just ride around and have fun. And one day, I was riding, he was walking. And he said, do you have the pickup truck with you today? I said, yeah, I do, Norman. He says, well, I'd like to make a bet with you. I said, sure, okay. I would bet that I'd be a better first-time driver than you were a first-time rider. I said, okay, fair enough. So after we finished up, I took his saddle off and I got him into the truck. And I showed him where to put one hoof on the accelerator and one hoof on the brake. And he had to put his hooves in the steering wheel and between the spokes because, no prehensile thumbs. So I fastened a seatbelt for him and I said, now, Norman, before we start out, we're going to stay on all the back roads. We're not going out on Interstate 70. You're just not ready for that. He said, okay. So we headed out on the roads near the barn, and he was doing real well. He was very conscientious with everything. Then we rounded this one curve, and there right in front of us was the fence around the 9th green of the Belmont Hills Country Club. Well, the next thing I knew, Norman got this wild look in his eyes, and he tromped down on the accelerator, and that truck, we were heading right toward that fence. I don't know how he did it, but we jumped that fence with that S10 pickup truck. I don't know how it did it. It only had 4 cylinders. And there we were on the 9th green of the Belmont Hills Country Club. I said, Norman, what are you doing? He said, you forget, I was a hunter-jumper. Okay, I said, get us out of here. Well, he got the truck turned around, gunned the gas. I still don't know how he did it, but that truck went back up over the fence, down onto the road. I said, Norman, you did fine. I said, let's go back to the barn. He said, well, I'm sorry. I'd like to make this up to you. I said, well, what do you have in mind, Norman? He said, well, why don't we drive down to the McDonald's that's near the mall? I'll get you a coffee, and I'll get myself a carrot shake if the ice cream machine's working. I said, okay, that's fine, but you got to remember, when we come out of the drive-thru, the on-ramp for Interstate 70 is right next to that on-ramp, right next to the drive-thru. We do not take the on-ramp for the interstate. You're going to go past it. We're going to go down to the red light, make a left, get back out on National Road, Route 40. Okay. So we drove down to the McDonald's, and we went through the drive-thru. I got my coffee. He got his carrot shake. The ice cream machine was working. Well, I had to pay for it. He'd left his wallet in his other saddle. And wouldn't you know it, when we came out of that drive-thru, he made the turn up the on-ramp for the interstate. And he had this wild look in his eyes, and he tromped out on the gas, and he yelled out, horsepower! And there we were going up the ramp toward Wheeling. Norman, I started yelling. I said, Norman, please, what are you doing? You can't ride on the interstate. Please, slow down, pull over, stop. We're going to get killed. Norman, please. And he was driving with this wild look in his eyes, and the forelock on his head was flapping in the wind. And I said, Norman, please, pull over, stop, slow down. Nay, he said. Well, just then, the truck started to run out of gas. So I was able to grab the wheel and steer it over onto the shoulder as we rolled to a stop. Just as I saw in the rearview mirror the red and blue lights on the roof of the silver Dodge with the flying wheel on the door, the Ohio Highway Patrol. And the trooper pulled his car in behind us. Oh, God. I said, Norman, we're in so much trouble. And the trooper's going to come to your window. You let me do the talking. Okay. I said, but Norman, before he gets here, you have to tell me. Please tell me. I was begging you, pleading with you to pull over, to stop, to slow down, and you wouldn't listen to me. Why not? And he looked at me, and the wind was blowing the forelock on his head. And he looked at me with those big, soft, thoroughbred eyes. And he said, "You didn't tell me, whoa."
His knees are in better condition than mine. Much better. Okay, we also want to thank these sponsors: Texas Commission on the Arts and the Texas Folklore Society, which has a table back there. Thank you all. If you're following the Liars Contest names in your program, there are some changes because we had 3 original contestants that had to bow out for personal reasons. Our next contestant, Margot Toombs. Come on up, Margot.
Oscar Wilde once said, "There are 2 great tragedies in life. One is not getting what you want, and the other one is getting what you want." If you have a bucket list, you need to be aware that unfulfilled dreams have consequences. So do the ones that come true. This is what happened to me. Every night for eternity, I am cursed to sit under his window and whisper, "Boo." Redemption for a vengeful heart. I feel like I need to tell the story before my memories fade. This is what happened to me. My story takes place at the turn of the century. This century, before phones were smart and private lives were public. I performed an open mic set at the Laugh Stop, a comedy club in Houston, Texas. The audience, mainly my friends and family, laughed at all of my jokes, and they took flash photos of me with their flash cameras, paparazzi style. All of that laughter and attention gave me a false sense of talent. After the show, a young, handsome comedian came up to me and suggested that I craft a 20-minute routine and perform at the Apollo. The Apollo in Harlem, New York. I was a rock star. My chest was as puffed up as a Malaysian sarama chicken at a foul beauty contest. That night, I checked off the top thing on my bucket list and made plans to quit my job. A day or two later, a friend from school suggested that I perform as an opening act for her husband, an Elvis impersonator at a sports bar outside of Houston. In hindsight, I should have checked out the venue before chirping. Yes, of course. 2, maybe 3 weeks later, I was on stage at this sports bar, dark and lousy with the smell of beer and sweat. It was an odd rectangular room with the stage at one end and these large TV screens at the other, separated by a bar and some inebriated patrons. The group from the Laugh Stop was there too. They were there to support me. But in addition to that group, there were colleagues and pals from high school. You see, at my 30th high school reunion, I was so excited about starting my new career that I bragged that I was leaving my career as a speech pathologist to become a star. Well, once I got on stage, I felt like my performance was going okay until I heard a voice from the back of the room. Boo! It was a knife in my gut. I couldn't breathe. I looked at my partner on stage. Did someone say boo? Again, that hateful word broke through the darkness. Boo! I was a deer in the headlights. I went blank just like this. Yeah, so I was a deer in the headlights, and my ego was smashed flat by an ugly urban cowboy lounging in the shadows. Somehow, I was able to finish my set and slink back to the table with my tail between my legs. Once I fell into my chair, my fans came over and patted me on the back, and then they expressed their condolences and hurried out to the parking lot to avoid the awkward situation and the obligation to cheer me up. I don't know what was worse, the booing or the pity-patting. So at midnight, I moved my car out of sight and waited for my tormentor. At 1 a.m., he stumbled out, and I followed him home to the suburbs outside of Houston. Once I got his address, I could find his name and phone number. And then I took photos of him doing embarrassing things with his super telephoto lens. I hung the pictures up around town, old school style. I called him from payphones when I could find them, late at night or early in the morning, and hang up. After a few months, I started saying boo ever so softly before hanging up. Making him pay became my mission. It gave me a reason to get out of bed. All of my pain and disappointment went into the bag of boo. My friends became weary of my obsession, and one by one, they disappeared. I was alone. All I had left was hate. All I had left was hate. The photos and the phone calls were not enough to feed my hunger. So I started waiting in the woods outside of his home, till I could hear him snoring through his open bedroom window. Then I sat under his window and gently whispered, "Boo, boo." I don't know how long this went on. His hair turned gray. He became thin and nervous. I was miserable too, but I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to live without Boo Boy. My life dragged on and on until one night I got up the courage to go inside and beg for forgiveness and release from this curse. But he shot me. I didn't want to die with a heart full of venom. I wanted relief for him and me. But it's too late. Now I have to sit under his window from dusk till dawn, chanting. I can feel my memories fading and my language leaving. Soon I will be reduced to that one wretched word. You know what it is. So at the count of 3, say it with me, okay? You ready? 1, 2, 3. Boo! Thank you.
Another sponsor, the Dennis and Emily Brock, for allowing us to create the David Brock Youth Fund to provide programming for our upcoming youth storytellers. They had a program this morning which was fantastic. Our 5th liar, David Kaufman. David Kaufman.
Well, I grew up in the northeast corner of Oklahoma in the Oklahoma Hills on the Osage Reservation in a little boom and bust oil town called Big Heart. We lived out west of town by the refinery, the Barnstall Refinery, where my daddy and most everybody else in town worked. And out our back door were thousands of acres of the last of the grassland prairie. Pristine Osage Reservation land. It's a pretty place, and in this time of year when that south wind starts to blow, there's something in that wind that drives livestock and little boys just crazy. And those last days of school, they just drag on by till that final bell finally rings and my friends, Homer Big Eagle and Bobby Wiley and I get on that yellow school bus. We'd go home and we'd take off our shirts and we wouldn't put them back on until September. We had a lot of freedom. We could roam all over the hills. We could ride our bicycles anywhere in town because everybody knew who you were and they knew your mother's phone number. We only had 2 rules: be home by dark and don't go down to Bird Creek. Well, Bobby lived just down the street, and his grandpa had a Model A Ford pickup truck in the backyard, and it didn't run, but It could be a pirate ship, it could be a rocket to Mars, or it could be a stagecoach, and that was just Monday. Homer lived on the other side of the county road, and they had a horse barn, and they had a windmill, and they raised rodeo goats. And we loved to fish out at Salt Creek, 3 or 4 miles up out on their ranch. In clear spring water, so clear you could see the perch nibbling on the worm on the end of your hook. We used those cane poles and red and white bobbers, but what we really wanted were the big catfish, and those were in Bird Creek. But we only had 2 rules: be home by dark and don't go down to Bird Creek. Now, Bird Creek's a slow-moving creek south of town in the refinery. It meanders through Osage County from Pawhuska to the Verdigris River. The only problem was we lived 3 miles downstream from the DuPont Chemical natural gas processing plant. And they'd been making formaldehyde and dumping it in that creek for 30 years. It was brown, and it was ugly, and it was dirty, and it was soupy, and big old bubbles would come up, and they'd pop with the smell that was a cross between country outhouse, skunk, and cheap perfume. It was a Darwinian biochemical disaster area. And it was so cool. We just had to go down there. But we only had 2 rules: be home by dark and don't go down to Bird Creek. Now, there's stories in the hills about Old Ned, the giant catfish, and people would say, better be good or Old Ned will get you. Or if one of your pets went missing, well, Old Ned had him. Our dog Bingo got into a crude oil spill, and we had to shave him and dust him with sulfur. People said Old Ned spit on him. Even small children weren't safe. But there were lots of stories about Old Ned, but I wanted to see him for my own self. Do that, we had to consult the local expert, Mr. Famous Corn Silk. Now, Corn Silk's had a shop down on the edge of town down by Bird Creek called the Corn Silk and Corn Silk Welding and Repair Shop, and Mr. Corn Silk was an old Cherokee man. He's pretty much retired. His son ran the place, Famous Corn Silk Jr. Ever there was a man who needed a nickname, it was Famous Corn Silk Jr., and he liked to tie knots when he was a little boy, so now everybody called him Not Famous. So we had Famous and Not Famous, and Mr. Corn Silk kind of sat in his rocking chair, smoking his pipe and staring out at the creek. We told him we wanted to catch Old Ned, and he said, well, boys, you're going to have the right kind of bait. I've been watching this creek a long time, and he comes out at night, usually on the full moon, but bait. You're going to need bait. Catfish usually like stink bait, but this creek done burned off his smeller years ago. He likes live kittens. And he likes skunks. But here's a secret hardly anybody knows. He loves watermelons. My son, Not Famous, been feeding him a long time. That'll be your perfect bait. Now, we knew that the best way to catch those big catfish was not on a hook, but by noodling. And to noodle a fish, you hold your breath and you swim down to the bottom and you stick a fist up a gill and you swim for your life. That's the manly way of catfishing. Well, we weren't stupid. We weren't going down in that swill. But maybe if we could get him far enough out on the bank, we could just pull him right up. Well, we had a plan, but it meant we were going to have to break some rules. And we only had 2 rules: be home by dark and don't go down to Bird Creek. We got there a little bit after sunset in that twilight. We were looking around and we saw that 2-way turtle we'd been hearing about. He came crawling out of the muck, dragging slime, looked around, put his head back inside that shell. Another head came out the other end and he crawled right back down into that creek. We saw the mudwamp snake, you know, the rattle-headed copper moccasin. It started getting dark and there was a green haze coming up off the creek. You could see the smell. Well, it started getting dark and the frogs began to sing. The big bullfrogs were singing bass and the little green frogs were singing tenor. As they sang, they'd light up different colors. They were tuning up to sing Mozart's Requiem Mass in D minor. When a bat came flying over, come by the fumes, he dropped dead right in that river. It was like the devil came down to Oklahoma. Well, Not Famous put that watermelon out there on the beach. And Homer brought his roping horse, his Poco Susan, his rodeo horse. And you know, rodeo horses, they're trained to back up once you rope a calf. So Homer put one loop around my waist. He put one around Bobby. We were both on each side. And that fish wasn't long. He saw that watermelon. He stuck his ugly head up out of there. He was a dirty green and he had yellow spots that were glowing and the back was like the back of an alligator. He was looking at us with his beady eyes and he starts crawling up on the bank. And so I stuck my fist up one gill, Bobby stuck his up the other. Homer had that rodeo horse and it started backing up. That fish was swimming back and forth trying to get back into that river. And we just kept pulling him right up there on that bank. Well, you can't keep a secret in a little bitty town like that. So pretty much everybody in town was down there at the creek. Just so happened the Cole Brothers Circus had just come to town and it was opening night. But nobody showed up because the show was down on the creek. Well, that ringmaster, he liked old Ned so well that he hired Homer and his horse Poco Susan and old Ned to go join the circus. And the last we saw them, they were on a tour of small town America. I heard tell the Ringling Brothers picked them up. Even after old Ned expired, they just kept right on the tour and they didn't have to stuff him because he was already pickled from all that formaldehyde. Saw the other day that they're still touring somewhere in Eastern Europe. Now, if you don't believe me, you just get out your telephone and Google it up. Go to freakshow.com/old Ned.
In your program, on pages 16 and 17, are listed all the sponsors, not only the organizations that I have named, but also individuals that have given at different levels to make this whole thing possible. And I, for one, am very appreciative because I came all the way from the Kansas City, Missouri area. So I appreciate everything that all those sponsors have done. Are you ready for the final contestant? Our number 6 teller is Lorene Stillwell. Come on up, Lorene.
Hello. I tell a lot of tales at Highland festivals and games, no surprise. These events are a celebration of our freedom due to our history. And I may well warn you, I am a stickler for historical accuracy. After the defeat of Bonnie Prince Charlie and the Highland clans in 1746, the Acts of Prescription made such activities as speaking the Scottish language, wearing the kilt, playing the bagpipes, and tossing telephone poles about punishable by death. The Scots may have invented the telephone a century earlier if it weren't for these terrible laws. But now, Scottish games and Highland festivals proliferate all over the world. And these celebrations have gone on since antiquity, more or less unchanged. Today's reveller gets a t-shirt with the Scottish flag. William Wallace, the so-called Braveheart, had to be content with a scabbard fashioned from the skin of his enemy. The sentiment is the same. So it is that any given day, any weekend, all Jock Tamson's children of every hue and from far-flung corners of the globe make a beeline for Scotland or a recreation thereof. Now, if you've never been to one, every festival is the same, every festival different. The saltire, the Scottish flag fluttering in the breeze, shaggy Highland whoos posing for pictures like rock stars, collie dogs practicing for the sheep herding competitions, and clans feverishly trying to press passerbys into membership. Nobody's safe at the games. And the Vikings are there, so braw in their horned helmets, and the Anglo-Saxon reenactors. Why do the English have to barge in on everything? Historically accurate, I suppose, but they are the problem, not the solution. And of course, I'm there in my own blinding clash of pattern and colour, ready to do battle for the oral tradition. And let everyone know that nothing about Braveheart, nothing was historically accurate. So, this one year, at a particular festival that I am legally prohibited from naming, I was slotted to tell tales right after my old friend Bob Craigie. Now, Bob did a weapons demonstration with authentic replica weapons with a wee bit of patter about the history of the weapons. Well, I showed up and found out that Bob was nae coming due to health concerns, but he'd sent the weapons ahead with the request that I tackle his spot. Well, Bob and I had worked hand in hand at many festivals, so I was happy to step in. I had no problem with the hefty, 3-foot battle axe telling about Robert the Bruce's definitive victory at the Battle of Bannockburn. For as long as 100 of us remain alive, we will never under any condition submit to English rule. It is not for riches or honour or glory we are fighting, but for freedom, that which no honest man gives up but with life itself. But I'm a wee bit on the short side, so when it came to the demonstration of the 6-foot claymore sword, it went a bit agley. You see, I was showing how the Highland warriors would swing the sword over their heads in battle when I unbalanced myself, tottering to the edge of the stage, and thinking to right myself, I transferred the sword from my right to my left hand, which somehow got me turned around with my back to the audience. And then I fell backwards off the stage. Next I knew, I was on the front of the stage with the sword still firmly gripped in my left hand, grateful that I hadn't accidentally cut off my own head. But my right wrist was bent at an extraordinary angle, and there was a wee bit of bone sticking out. It didn't hurt. The pain would come later with a medical bill. But the audience, thinking this was all part of the show, was cheering and clapping enthusiastically. One wee boy yelled, "It's so real!" Especially the screams of the dying as they fell in battle. Do it again. The Anglo-Saxon reenactors were rushing towards me. One of them claimed to be a medic. Historically inaccurate, but yes, like them. The bagpipe band that was queuing up to play after me surrounded me protectively, playing Scotland the Brave. I raised the sword in my left hand. They may take away our lives, but they cannot take our freedom! The fairground erupted. Shouts of Alba go Bra resounded from all corners, and folk began to flock to our tent. Never had the storytelling attracted such attention. Then I heard, "Freochillen, Jesse Prest, and the Hendersons are here." My kin, the MacDonalds, the Frasers, and the Hendersons, those mad Vikings, had come to my aid. They took to the stage of battle and forced the Anglo-Saxons off, where the collie dogs herded them back to their encampment like sheep. Then my kin took my sword away from me, lest I succeed in cutting off my own head, they said. Fair enough. But it was so glorious, the cheering, the clapping. But now the bagpipe band was ready to play. So they produced a handcart, which I was loaded onto, and all the Viking and clansmen and I bowed, and I was wheeled off through cheering crowds that pressed cash and celebratory drink on me from all sides, and me with only one working hand and nae tip jar. Now, this festival, which I am legally prohibited from naming, is willing to have me back to tell stories, but they have forbidden me from handling any weapons, even in the sales tents. And they've told me, don't break any more bones. Who can promise that? At any proper festival, bones break. Heads may be snicked off, and at least one disaster is guaranteed historically. And you know what a stickler I am for historical accuracy. And that is the truth. Thank you.
All right, judges, those are the 6 contestants. Their names again in order were Chester Weems, Walt Belcher, Judy Tarowski, Margot Toombs, David Kaufman, and Lorraine Stillwell. So if the judges would please exit and do your decision making. Now, while they do that, And it's going to be a hard decision, isn't it? Let's just a round of applause for all 6 of these tellers. Weren't they fabulous? All right, now, here's my story. Feral hogs, a growing problem in Missouri Ozarks. That headline caught my attention recently. I read the article and it had some theories about how almost 30,000 feral hogs have ended up in the Missouri Ozarks, deep in Missouri, mostly in the Mark Twain National Forest. Now, I got to thinking about that because, you see, I used to live down there. And I think I may know something about how those pigs ended up there. I'm not sure. In 1978, my husband Harry and I bought 10 acres of land outside West Plains, Missouri. It's down on the Arkansas border in central Missouri. It's surrounded on 3 sides by the Mark Twain National Forest. Our 10 acres had the house, a barn, a pond, a hill, and a spring, and we had a couple of horses, a mule, and a mess of pigs. Now, my husband decided he wanted to have a garden. So he went to town, bought his seeds, and he planted a garden. I didn't even know where he planted it. I don't know. We had 10 acres. I was taking care of the house. At the end of the growing season, Harry came to me and said, "Would you like to see my garden?" I said, "Sure." So I followed Harry out of the house, past the barn, past the pond, up the hill, to the back side of the hill where the spring was, and there it was. And Harry said, "What do you think of my garden?" And I said, "Harry, did you plant anything besides cabbage?" He said, "No, Aid Hardware down on the square had a special on cabbage seed packets that I just could not resist." "Harry, how many heads of cabbage are there?" He said, "Well, 3, 4, maybe 500. It was a really good sale." I said, "Harry, you will only eat cabbage if it's made into coleslaw. You and I cannot eat that much coleslaw. You don't like boiled cabbage. You don't like sauerkraut. Only coleslaw. We cannot eat that much coleslaw, and we don't even know that many people that can eat that much coleslaw. What am I supposed to do?" And as the reliable husband and supportive husband that Harry was, well, you'll figure something out. And I did. I took the biggest head of cabbage I could find in his garden and a black marker, and I drew eyes and a nose and a mouth, and then I took some sticks and some pieces of fabric and fashioned them all together, and I created the very first Cabbage Patch doll. She was so cute, and I thought, I can make these and sell them from the back of the pickup down on the courthouse square in West Plains. People will like this. Cabbage Patch dolls, right? I think it might catch on. But the hot Ozark sun and the humidity worked a whole lot faster than I could by myself. So those cabbage heads were starting to rot. So there was only one thing left to do. Harry and I decided to feed the cabbage to the pigs. So he and I proceeded to chuck hundreds of heads of cabbage to the pigs. And the pigs did enjoy all that cabbage. The next morning, I was in the kitchen doing some stuff, and looked out the kitchen window, and something in the pig pen caught my eye. And I wasn't exactly sure what was going on, but something was different. So I went out to the pig pen to see what was going on. Those pigs, well, you know how it is when you get older and you eat raw vegetables and some of them kind of bloat you up with gas? Well, that's what was happening to my pigs. They were bloated with that gas from all those heads of cabbage. And as I stood there wondering, what in the world, the little pigs began to float up into the air. Their feet came off the ground. They began to float. And then the medium-sized pigs, they began to float. And then the big one, but then Petunia, my prize sow, I could not let Petunia float away. So I grabbed a hold of Petunia's foot to hold her down to the ground. But she was so bloated that she just kept rising, and she raised me right up off the ground as I was holding on to her hind leg, and I yelled, "Harry, Harry, call 911, get me some help." The wind was coming from the west, blowing east, right toward the town of West Plains, Missouri. When we got over part of West Plains, I looked down, and oh yes, there was Porter Wagner Boulevard. Porter Wagner was born and raised in West Plains, Missouri, and that's the main drag in town, and I could see all the traffic on it, and the wind just kept blowing the pigs and me toward the east. And then I looked down, and oh my God, there's the courthouse. Well, that's where I was going to make all that money selling those dolls. And there's Aid Hardware, that started all this trouble. And then I heard a siren, and I saw the fire truck coming up Porter Wagner Boulevard. Harry actually did something I asked of him. I was so excited. And I watched the fire truck go past the square and went on east toward the east side of town, and it pulled into the Piggly Wiggly parking lot. And the pigs and I are floating farther and farther that way, ever so gently. And I noticed there were a lot of cars at the Piggly Wiggly parking lot. And then I remembered every Tuesday, Piggly Wiggly has a special on their pickled pig's feet. That's where everybody was. So we get over there, and I see the firemen have gotten out of their truck, and they're all standing around and holding something, and I'm thinking, they have a trampoline net. Of course, all I have to do is let go of Petunia, and I will drop safely into that trampoline net. So I get over that, and the fire chief is saying, let go, we'll catch you. But as I got right over it and looked down, I realized that is not a trampoline net. That is a quilt. It's just a quilt. And of course, it was the Ozarks. And the pattern on that quilt was Jacob's ladder. See, the fire chief got that new ladder he'd been asking for. So I let go of Petunia and fell right safely onto that quilt. Well, I was safe, but Petunia and the rest of my pigs were still floating, getting closer to the edge of town and the edge of the Mark Twain National Forest. Do you know how it is when you blow up a balloon just as big as you can, and then you let go of it? And as the air escapes from that balloon, it just circles up and down and all around. That's what was happening to my pigs. As it was being released, those pigs were twirling up and down and all around. There was an oink oink here and an oink oink there, here an oink, there an oink, everywhere an oink oink. And those pigs began to just gently fall toward the earth, landing ever so softly, and then scurrying into the Mark Twain National Forest. The last one to land was Petunia, my prize sow. Petunia looked at me. I said, "Oh, Petunia, Suey, here, Piggy, come to me." Petunia turned 180 degrees after putting that snout nose of hers up in the air. She took that little curly tail of hers and straightened it right up. That was the last thing Petunia ever said to me. She sauntered into the Mark Twain National Forest, never to be seen again. Feral hogs, a growing problem in Missouri Ozarks. All because in 1978, Aid Hardware had a special on cabbage seed packets that Harry just could not resist. Thank you. Thank you. Judges aren't done yet, are they? Ooh, judges aren't done yet. Pardon? They got into a fight, Joel says. Yeah, it's a tough decision sometimes. They are being graded on several different things. I don't know if I've got that list with me. They have to look at originality and audience participation and the delivery. So they're being judged on several different categories, and the judges were filling out sheets for each individual teller and scoring, and then that all gets put together, and then they have a little discussion about who is the first place liar in this year's Texas Liars Contest. Our three judges are a librarian, Elizabeth Schreier, Peggy Capps, a longtime TSA member, and Brent Hampton, a retired minister. Do we trust them with the decision? Do we trust them? Yeah, we'll trust them. Well, I don't sing and dance. And and the thing is, I have to tell you, I only have one tall tale. My feral hog story is just kind of a fluke. But it's been good to me. Feral hogs has been really good to me. I won here in Texas, I won in Kansas, and took second place in Missouri. So feral hogs are quite profitable for me. Believe it or not. Do you want to come up and tell a story? All right. Let's welcome Rich White, who won 2 years ago, to come up. He specializes in tall tales. All right.
Since we're doing reruns while we're waiting, how many of you were here 2 years ago for the Liars Contest? Oh, good. This will be new to some of you. There's no way you're taking that bus back to Chicago. That is what my mother said when she found out that Aunt Eddie had ridden a midnight Greyhound from Chicago down to southern Illinois by herself. Now, the Midnight Greyhound had quite a reputation for having some very interesting, shall we say, passengers. And just between you and me, Aunt Eddie would have fit right in. But Mom decided I should drive Aunt Eddie back to Chicago. 16 years old, driving a 500-mile round trip on Route 66. I was excited till Aunt Eddie said, well, okay, but I'm a driving and we're taking the Illinois River Road. Now, the Illinois River Road is a scenic byway, just what a 16-year-old kid wants to ride on. Well, we started out running right along the river. And then at some point, the road wound its way up to the top of the river bluff. We were just approaching this scenic overlook when Aunt Eddie hit a pothole and her leg flew out the window. Did I mention Aunt Eddie had a wooden leg? It didn't fit really well, so she had it up on the dash while she was driving. We watched as that leg flew off a 500-foot cliff and started soaring down into the river valley, till this magnificent bald eagle swooped in, snagged that leg right out of the air, and flew off to its nest in top of a tree down by the river. Believe it or not, it's not the first time Aunt Eddie had misplaced her wooden leg. In fact, she carried a spare in her pocketbook. It was a little plastic fold-up job. She got at a garage sale for $0.25. Now, walking on that spare leg is a lot like driving your car on one of those little donut spare tires, you know. You don't want to do it for very long. So we drove down off that river bluff, found a little dirt road that ran right along the river, and went right by that 250-foot cottonwood tree with the eagle's nest in the top. And we could see Aunt Eddie's leg sticking out of that eagle's nest. It was actually pretty easy to spot because the size 13 hot pink Converse high top on the end of that leg that just matched the one on Aunt Eddie's right foot. But how in the world are we going to get that thing down? Well, I was more than a little surprised when Aunt Eddie took off her right arm and threw it up at that eagle's nest. As that arm went by the nest, that spring-loaded hand glomped onto that hot pink high top and pulled the leg right out of the nest. And thus united, the arm and the leg started tumbling towards the ground, till the arm went on one side of a tree limb and the leg went on the other side, and there they hung, 137 feet off the ground. And Aunt Eddie fresh out of spare limbs to throw at it. Luckily, there was a squirrel lived in that tree, and that squirrel was real curious about that hot pink high top. While the squirrel was nosing around on that shoe, that squirrel's fuzzy tail was tickling that artificial hand. So much, the hand lost its grip, allowing the leg to fall from the tree. Also freeing the arm. Allowing the arm to fall from the side of the tree. That freed the leg and the squirrel to fall from the other side of the limb. It didn't look good for that poor little squirrel, falling from 137 feet. But luckily, it was a flying squirrel. Holding tightly to his hot pink high top, that squirrel spread his wings and managed to glide to a smooth, safe landing right in the middle of the river. Now, being made of burley maple, that leg floated just fine, but you know that poor little squirrel, he looked a little perplexed sitting there on that wooden leg, slowly floating down the river, until he got an idea. That squirrel plopped down on his belly with two legs on each side of that wooden leg, and paddling with all 4 feet, he maneuvered that leg right over to me, and I swear he tipped his hat as he jumped off that leg and hightailed it for the woods. Well, once Aunt Eddie got her good leg back on, she said, "I'm beat. I think we better stop for the night." Well, the next town we came to was Bath, Illinois. Population 129. And we stopped in at the Bath House, hotel, bait shop, and beauty parlor. Finest hotel in town. Yeah, I know, it was the only hotel in town. And wouldn't you know it, we had arrived during their 3-day busy season, the weekend of the Redneck Fishing Tournament. There weren't but one of their 5 rooms even available, the bridal suite. But hey, it was okay. It had twin beds and its own indoor bathroom. So we were fine. Got him time to get ready for bed that night, and Aunt Eddie went at the bathroom first. She came out wearing a Harley-Davidson do-rag on her head and carrying 2 glasses of water. I went in at the bathroom. I found Aunt Eddie's hair on the back of the toilet, along with her unmentionables. I just brushed my teeth, came out, and jumped right into bed. And, well, Aunt Eddie got up, and she took off her eyeglass and put them there on the side of on the bedside table, and then she put her false teeth in one glass of water and her glass eye in the other. And she took off her hearing aid and put it on the table, followed by her prosthetic ear. And then she placed her artificial nose on a carefully folded Kleenex just in case it started running during the night, you know. It took me a little while to get sleep that night. I was trying to estimate the percentage of Aunt Eddie that was scattered around the room compared to part of Aunt Eddie that was asleep over there in the other bed. I figured about 37%. Well, sir, the next morning as we were getting ready to leave the hotel, we saw these boys playing marbles, and Aunt Eddie said, "Can I play?" It turns out Aunt Eddie had a real good eye for marbles. She popped that sucker out and used it as her shooter in no time. She'd won all the marbles, and we got on our way. Well, when we got to Aunt Eddie's house there in Chicago, she wanted to give me a little memento to remember her trip by. You're getting ahead of me here. She decided to give me that special marble. She popped it out and handed it to me. She filled the empty hole with a big green cat's eye she had in her pocketbook. Now, that's a glass marble that's called a cat's eye. It wasn't a real cat's eye. But anyway, I still carry that special marble with me. Because Aunt Eddie used to say, "Long as you carry that marble, I got my eye on you." And there's many a time that kept me out of trouble. I thank you.
Right. Thank you, Rich White and Aunt Eddie, for that memorable story. I have results. I have the judges' results. So I would like all 6 contestants to line up here on the stage for the presentation. Oh, can we do it just in the front? I don't get to make that decision, but can we? Sue, can we do it just down front?
Sure, but it'd be nice to get them underneath.
Well, we got a couple that have a lot of trouble getting up. All right, down front. Can the mic be moved?
Second place gets a certificate and $75 is, the right check, so they get the right amount of money, Maureen Stillwell. Yeah, she had the catastrophe for this festival. Does that mean we have to ban her from all future festivals? No, 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 no. All right, are you ready? The winner of this year's Texas Liars Contest is Chester Weems. And that concludes the Liars Contest. Work on your lie for next year and look at your program to see what's coming up next in all the different areas.